Welcome to the Humanergy Leadership Podcast. My name is David Wheatley. We're here to talk leadership in small, bite-sized and practical chunks. Enjoy.
This is another of our first Friday work sessions presented by Lance Satterthwaite, one of my colleagues for quite a while now. And he's talking about the sweet spot of collaboration. And this comes from our What Great Teams Do Great book, and really gets to the when we should be working together and when we shouldn't be working together as teams. But he gets into the details. You can still register for our first Fridays in 2024. We've got a season packed out through till June. And if you register and you'll get an invite, and then just come and join us at noon Eastern on every first Friday of the month and have a good work session, including snippets like you're about to hear.
Thanks, David. Greetings all. Thanks for spending your Friday afternoon with us, and looking forward to today's topic on the sweet spot of collaboration. So today's content has been actually derived over many years, both at Humanergy with our clients themselves, as well as our own internal experience working as a team. We have written about this concept in our book, What Great Teams Do Great. And if you're familiar with the model itself, today we're actually going to be zeroing in on the section about doing work together. So the root of this idea, at least from what I remember of it, is about 15 years ago, the Humanergy team was working together on a project. And I would say we were trying to work together. And we were under a pretty serious time constraint around producing a rather large and complicated RFP, or a request for a proposal. And it was a situation that was really going to require all hands on deck in order to complete. And the good news is, we had the commitment, we had the talent to get this proposal done. And oftentimes we worked well together. So we locked ourselves into, at that time we had a studio, we locked ourselves into the studio, rolled up our sleeves and got to work. The bad news is, at about an hour into that process, there was a collective sense of extreme frustration in working together with each other. And we were feeling the stress of this looming deadline. And my calculation is, at the rate we were going, it was probably going to take us about 3.2 billion years to get this proposal done. And it just wasn't working. And it was actually in that moment of challenge that really led to a breakthrough in our approach in working as a team, as well as what we later termed the sweet spot of collaboration. So if we look at defining a couple parts of this term, I'm going to start with sweet spot. And at least my exposure to the term sweet spot started actually when I was playing baseball. And I remember one of our baseball coaches talking about there's literally an optimum spot on the baseball bat where the ball will travel faster and further from the bat. So it's not near the handle, it's not at the end, but it's about 3/4 of the way up from the handle. And what was interesting, if you've ever had this experience in baseball or softball, when you hit the ball in that spot, it's like a effortless transition of energy. It's like the ball literally just pops off the bat. And so if I'm going to define the idea of sweet spot, it is a place where we can actually maximize the result, right? And that is true of not just the baseball bat, but in terms of working together. If I define, a really simple definition of collaboration, two or more people working together to achieve the results, and essentially what we're talking about collaboration is, I think, synonymous with the word teamwork, right? And we know terms like many hands make light work, or team, TEAM, together each accomplishes more, right? And so we understand the idea that if a team is going to be a great team, somewhere in there, they have to have the ability to collaborate, and they have to have the ability to achieve results somehow together, right? So if I take those and now combine them, I think the sweet spot of collaboration is this idea of two or more people working together in a way that maximizes, right? In a way that maximizes the results. And so what we're really talking about in terms of maximizing is where can the team be most effective and where can the team be most efficient? So if I go back to this idea of we were responsible for writing this proposal, we needed not only an awesome proposal, right? That's the effective part, but we also needed it to be produced as quickly as possible, right? And that's the efficiency part. So before I go any further, I want to go to a fairy tale, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? And here's what we know about Goldilocks and the Three Bears. So Goldilocks somehow ends up in the bear's house, and as she's going through the house, she tries the food or she tries the bed, etc. And what she always likes is the baby bear's stuff, right? And she termed it, it's just right. So there's almost like this continuum. It was too hard, it was too soft, it was just right. It was too hot, too cold, it was just right. And I think that is really the idea of the sweet spot of collaboration, which is somewhere in there, we don't want to take an under collaborative approach, but somewhere in there, we don't want to be overly collaborative. There's a zone that is, how do we collaborate in a way that is just right or maximizes the results? So what we're going to look at next then is how do we recognize whether we're in the under zone, the over zone, or the just right zone? So the symptoms around under collaborative, I would offer is threefold. One, when people are getting overwhelmed. Two is when they're confused and or stuck. And three is when they are achieving less than the optimal result, right? And so I'm gonna give some examples of this. One is, depending on how you're wired and who you are, you may have the experience of there's too much to do and not enough time to do it, right? And rather than ask for help, you shoulder the burden of the work, you work longer hours, you might become stressed, you might become exhausted. And that's just one example of being under collaborative. There are other times as we're working together, maybe I don't fully understand an assignment and I go back to my work area and I'm racking my brain on what's the right next step, or I don't fully understand this, or I get stuck on a project and I just don't know how to move forward, right? That's an example of when I'm under collaborative. Or maybe there are times at work where you go about and you make a change and then all of a sudden you didn't realize the implications of that change. And so now all of a sudden you get some feedback or there's some noise in the system about that. And you have to actually go back to the drawing board. You have to actually rework or change the change, and it just causes more work and even more headaches, right? So those are all examples of what are we really talking about when we're taking a quote an under collaborative approach. And had we reached out earlier or included others sooner, it actually would have been not more effective, but also in the end, more efficient. Let's look at then the other end of the spectrum here around being overly collaborative. And I think these symptoms are a couple things. One is there's a feeling when we're now collaborating and working with people, we get really frustrated about that. And rather than it being like, oh, this is cool, like working with people, it's getting hard. We don't feel like we're getting anywhere. We're spinning our wheels. And you really do leave the sense of like, this should not be this hard, right? So some examples, if you've ever sat in a meeting and the group's trying to make a decision and you think, I just really wish the leader of this meeting would go ahead and make the decision, right? We've talked about it, and we spend the next half hour still talking about it, and we get nowhere, and we walk out of the meeting without a decision. That's an example of over collaboration. The feeling in terms of I have to include now all departments in a decision about a process change, whereas that change was actually only going to impact a couple departments, right? But I feel like I now have to include, or the organization expects me to include all departments in that. In our case at Humanergy 15 years ago, we were literally trying to work on this proposal. We were all sat in a room trying to both create and then edit a really lengthy document with our entire staff present. And it just wasn't going to work out. And so there's no doubt that work can be hard, but at times being overly collaborative actually creates unnecessary issues and it wastes time. So how do we know if we're better or more in that sweet spot? And I'd offer a couple things. One is we experience those sort of light bulb or aha moments, like, oh man, I just hadn't even thought of that. And like you came to a realization. The term synergy, which I think most people have heard of, how I always think about synergy is my ideas plus your ideas were somehow combined to build a better mousetrap, right? That we created something different than what either one of us had thought about, right? So 1 and 1 plus 3 is another way of saying that. And it's actually fun, right? It's enjoyable, it's energizing when we work with people. And I think that's when we know we're in that sweet spot zone. So just a couple examples. One is if I draft an email and I ask a trusted coworker to look at that email to maybe check for content or check for tone. But what I don't do is I don't ask 5 trusted coworkers. If you have 5 trusted coworkers, I don't ask 5 trusted coworkers to review it, because I'm going to end up with actually a bunch of different opinions of what I need to change. And it just may waste a lot of people's time. Or another example, we have a meeting as a leadership team and we align on some goals on a project. But then what we do is we assign one person in the room to, quote, lead the project. They're going to leave that room. They're going to pull together other project team members to further scope the project, to put a project plan in place. Eventually, that project lead will come back to the leadership team to give some project status updates, but that group itself is no longer working on trying to design the whole project in the room itself. Or in the case of Humanergy, and this is what actually happened 15 years ago, we were aligned on the purpose of the RFP. We understood the deadlines. And what we did next was the breakthrough, which is we actually assigned out each section to a person. We said, go away for 2 hours, work on that section, come back, share where you're at with those in those 2 hours, and we'll better the ball, right? We'll give some feedback about how to improve it. Then we went away again and worked on improving it based on that feedback. So we went through multiple rounds and multiple iterations of this idea of divide and conquer. And in the end, we had a great proposal and we accomplished it well before the deadline. So then the question is to collaborate or not to collaborate, right? And in supporting a lot of teams on this concept, I'm going to share at least some criteria worth considering as you think about when you should and when you should not collaborate. So on the should side, when should I collaborate? Some of what we've talked about already, if I need somebody's skill set, right? Because maybe they have more experience or they are more of the subject matter experts, bring them in, right? I'm stuck. I bring them in and I reach out, ask for help. If whatever challenge or problem you are encountering is both complex in that bringing more minds in will actually help create clarity or better understanding, or the problem, the issue is important and it's high risk and it's critical, and bringing others in will help mitigate that risk, that's a good time to collaborate, right? So in a nutshell, it's like by bringing others in, there's going to be real value added to that. Other times I should consider collaborating just from a capacity standpoint. If it's like, hey, we need additional resources to get the goal done within the time frame we have, right? It makes sense to bring others in. If I want to expand, so anytime I'm trying to brainstorm and get creative, bringing more people into the fold makes sense. If we have enough time to do it, if there is potential for real synergy, absolutely. And the last one around, and I think this is some of the tension that leaders often feel, is how much buy-in and commitment am I trying to get from the very people I'm trying to collaborate with, right? And I just love the phrase, involve me early, I'll be your partner. Involve me late, I'll be your judge, right? So involve me early, I'll be your partner. Involve me late, I'll be your judge. And so there are times to bring people in to try and get their buy-in and commitment to it. So on the flip side of that is, when should I not consider collaboration? If I can actually solve the problem myself, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think one of the ones that leaders are constantly weighing out is Will it add real value? And I would even offer, is it counterproductive, right? Will it slow you down and literally feel like a waste and a non-value added experience by soliciting people's ideas and input? Sometimes, obviously, when there's time constraints, you can't do it. When already the decision has been made and it's non-negotiable, that is not a good time to, quote, collaborate and try and get people bought in. So my experience in watching several leaders navigate this is at times they'll actually create unnecessary challenges for themselves and their team, because they present it as, this is open-ended, this is something for us to discuss, because they were trying to get their buy-in and commitment to it. In reality, the decision was made. So when the team goes a different direction, then all of a sudden we have issues, we have mistrust getting created. So if the decision's been made, simply state that. When you're trying to narrow down and distill versus brainstorm and expand, that's a good time to either not collaborate or collaborate with less people when it's not as critical or complex. And again, when you're the subject matter expert, and that goes to this idea of, is there real value being added by bringing others in? If you already are the subject matter expert, maybe that is the time to not actually collaborate. I want to share two additional thoughts with you just on this idea. One is, I think you need to be really intentional about trying to design for the sweet spot. So I know there are a lot of leaders that try to be really inclusive, which on the surface is a great thing, right? I mean, it leads to things like employee engagement or a motivated workforce. The idea around designing the engagement is, especially if I have a large amount of people, like all my staff I'm trying to engage with them on, how do I go about doing that? And so just as a recent example, I'm working with a group on a strategic planning process. The leadership team wants to get input from their employees, but their employees range about 100 employees over the course of 3 different shifts, right? It's probably not going to be realistic to involve all the employees in that strategic planning session. And so what they've come up with is they're going to have a series of employee meetings where they frame up the suggestions that they're looking for, have some conversation, and then designed a very structured worksheet to collect employees' input, right? That input's going to feed into the strategic planning session, and then the group afterwards is going to talk and make the connections with their employees about how they used their input to form the 2024 strategic plan, right? That's more in the idea of the sweet spot. So anytime you have the ability to, and it's possibly through surveys or brainstorming sessions, sometimes it's one-on-ones or team meetings, I think those are all avenues for purposely designing for the sweet spot and trying to find something that is, how can we be most effective? How can we be most efficient? I think part 2 is staying in the sweet spot takes real courage. And so I literally have facilitated thousands of meetings. In my experiences in a meeting, you can be in the sweet spot in one moment, and then all of a sudden it migrates to being especially overly collaborative. And so in that situation, people either start deep diving an issue that's overly complex to solve in that meeting itself, or maybe the issue doesn't pertain now to everybody in the room, right? And it wastes some team members' time. And so someone in those moments has to have the courage to ask things like, are we being overly collaborative in this moment, right? Would we be better served to take this issue offline, have a few people in this group, maybe do some further research or problem solving, and bring back their solutions to the team at our next meeting, right? Should we table this discussion or put it in the parking lot and really just determine who's going to do what with it and by when with that issue, right? And so those are all interventions and avenues for exercising the courage to stay in the sweet spot. So the last piece, I don't know how many of you, I know several on screen have worked with Humanergy a long time. I don't know if you know the backdrop of Humanergy, but when David and John somewhere were in a crazy session and created the word Humanergy, they literally took the word human and synergy, and that's what Humanergy is, right? Human synergy, and combined it. And so we believe at Humanergy, collaboration is an awesome thing, right? The big and of that is and too little or and too much collaboration is not. And so I just encourage you to take the concepts from today, especially as you're working with others, apply some of this wisdom to helping your teams be the most effective as well as the most efficient. So best wishes heading into 2024. Happy holidays from all of us at Humanergy, and thanks and take care.
Thank you, Lance. That was our first Friday on the sweet spot of collaboration from What Great Teams Do Great. And if you've not come across the What Great Teams Do Great book yet, I encourage you to go out there and have a look.
That was the Humanergy Leadership Podcast. My name's David Wheatley. For further information about Humanergy, go to humanergy.com or check out our latest book, What Great Teams Do Great, from all good bookstores. Have a good one. Stay healthy.